Hello again, and welcome to the 9th set of puzzles from Hexagony, the Slitherlinks. This example is written by Eric Fox, and I'm just going to jump right in, because Slitherlink is a pretty easy puzzle type to understand and explain. You just draw a loop between these little, on these edges, and every time there's a number, you touch that many edges. So this 3 and this 0 immediately combine to say this edge is not used, and these ones are. We can then immediately take it a step farther with this 2, as we cannot have 3 lines coming out of the same point, as that would not be a continuous loop. And then you kind of get stuck here. And this is where the Slitherlink patterns come in. Slitherlink is all about patterns and what they mean. So what we can do is this 2 is now in a corner. So its options are this and this. And, well, we can see what happens to it with this 3. It's either going to do this, which is bad, or this, which is correct. And now this is a pattern that I recognize, this corner 2, 3, where this will be forced and this segment here will not be used. You can also see it in this case that it's going to require all of these segments to come out, this to come down. Can't come through the corner of the 1. This is now a corner, so if you do this, then regardless of the option, we've prematurely closed the loop. We can also say that if we take this pair from the 3, another thing that can be useful to look at is the high clues, or forced corners. We'd get this, and that's just not working. So instead we get this other corner, and then we just kind of close out the remainder of the puzzle. I know I kind of glossed over stuff there, but that's because this is not the best example for showing, for explaining how Slitherlink can be solved. It's a good example to show how Slitherlink works, but for a more in-depth example, we're going to go into the first contest puzzle, which I believe this one was worth either 10 or 15 points. I can't actually remember. And we're gonna do this one with marking all of the X's. So we can start with these corners, as clues and corners always give you information, whether it be the 1 that the edges are not used, the 3 that they are, or the 2 that you get these edges. And I'm not going to explain why you get these in the corner. I'm going to leave that as an exercise to the viewer. But that is something that is forced from just this 2 in the corner. Similarly, these diagonally touching 3s, it gives some progress. Diagonally chained clues in a Slitherlink are very powerful. So we know one of these 2 edges is used, which means, considering we'll have 2 coming out of this dot, or this intersection, we'll have one of these 2 being used, and that means one of these 2 is used, and that means one of these 2 is used. Well, this one's off the grid, so it's just not used at all. And so just by chaining from this set of 3s, we get this segment. Now, this segment's not terribly useful, but I'm showing this segment to set up the concept. Similarly, with these 3s, we can kind of just resolve the entire middle bit. And I'm going to mark all these X's because I think they'll be useful, just to kind of show where the loop is being guided. Get this little combo. This area can no longer be used, so we get this. Kind of opposing 3, because we have to leave 1 unused, so we can't use either of those unused, because we can't use both of these 2 by the 1. We can do the same kind of diagonal chaining through this 2 to get these 2 X's. Note that we cannot do the same in this direction, because we don't know if this is one of these 2 segments being used or neither. However, up here, we can do the same chaining coming out of this one, where one of these is used, one of these is used, so neither and both of those. And you get to a situation that looks kind of like this. You can do another diagonal chain out of this 2 to get these 2. a little diagonal push to get that segment. Another thing with touching ones, if this segment is used, look what it does. It immediately traps itself, so it's not used. But none of that's really crucial. What is crucial is using those techniques in the top right. One of those will be used, so we get this, same thing. And at this point, you might be thinking, how do you make progress? And this is something I was thinking when I first saw this puzzle, because this part is kind of a sticking point. If you were to try to use uniqueness, you would say that this too is only unique if this segment were to be done like this, and then it all just kind of works out nicely. But that's not very interesting, is it? It's much more interesting to see how that happens, why that's done. And in order to do that, I need to figure out, again, how to do that. Give me a moment to find that, to find the problem. Ah, yes, here's the problem. If one of these two segments is used, look what happens. Through diagonal chaining, kind of off this X to over here, this 3 is now impossible to satisfy. Therefore, neither of those segments can be used, so we get this one. Again, like regardless of which one feeds in, we'll get that one coming out. And this is where the progress will come from. Because now we get exactly what I said was going to happen by the fact that this has a unique solution. Note that if we take this segment, we're going to create a loop prematurely, so we don't. Similarly, coming through here would create a premature loop, so we don't. Clearing out this bottom right. Coming back from this bottom section. Now this is a corner, this is a corner, this is also going to be a corner. And by a corner, I mean it's going to do one of these two things, which gives us this segment. Again, we can use diagonal chaining to get that segment. This 2 is satisfied, so we can actually just come around here. And we can see how the loop gets pushed around. We don't want to prematurely close, we want to satisfy all the corners. And that would be Eric Fox's Slitherlink from Hexagony. It was worth 15 points, so now let's go into the 25 point one that I made. This one is hexagonal. So right away, I said a lot of Slitherlink is pattern-based. This is still true for the hexagonal form. But there's some extra things that can happen as a result of the geometry being different, and all of the usual patterns don't apply. So let's start again with the edges, because the edges are usually a good place to look. This 2 and what is basically a corner can't use any of those. This 5 will have to use both. This 4 has to use its back 3. And then this 3 is the same thing as with the 2 in the corner of the previous puzzle, where it has 2 options, but they both do this. Alright, now if we look at the touching ones, these are actually even stronger. This segment is already broken, because, you know, it would immediately trap itself. None of the other segments in this area are immediate problems, but this is kind of the basic level stuff in this particular Slitherlink puzzle. And so, where's the starting point? Well, the starting point in this puzzle that I nicknamed Off by 3 is this 525. And I'm just going to let that sit in the air for a moment. Why is that the starting point? Well, it's the starting point, because if this is not a used segment, look what happens. It immediately breaks. So, because of this 525 being, and the fact that it's symmetric, the 2 is already forced. So something that we get from each point having 3 options instead of 4 is having 2 incorrect options immediately removes the last one. And we get this segment because without it, as you can see, this 5 gets pushed back into a loop prematurely. Now we can also say if we do this, then this segment won't have anywhere to go. So it goes this way. And we can also say that it won't lead back this towards the middle part. So this 5 is now actually fully figured out. I'm going to mark these extra x's and remove some of the ones that are no longer necessary. I'm not going to, similarly, this x means these are both x's. There's just no way to use those. Using one will use both, so the one would be overloaded. And now, this 2, similar to what we could do with a 1 with a line pointing into it on a square Slitherlink, the fact that this x exists means that we have 2 options, the left side or the right side. And both of those do this kind of propagation. Okay, so now we can actually rule out this segment because we need to escape out the corner here. So we have 1 entry, 2 entries. So one thing you can do on any loop puzzle is something that we call entry counting. Every subregion of a puzzle will be entered an even number of times. Go ahead, try to find a counterexample. I'm sure you can if you stick it on a torus or something, but generally, for this kind of thing, in all cases, if it goes in, it must come out. Also missed those 2 earlier. So somehow we have to get this segment from the 4 up to here. And we have to get through these 1s, which are going to be pretty restricted. The biggest thing to say is that we have to pass through this channel. Because we can't just take these 2 and avoid it. We can't take these 2 and avoid it. So we do this. And then the same thing that gave us this contradiction is going to give us some more x's over here. Now, note, this now would create a 3, so it's not going to be used. This is going to push itself around. This is going to finish the 4. It's going to give us this 1. It's going to determine the direction. We don't want to prematurely close the loop. Or I should say, yeah, prematurely close the section. And so that resolves the top right. And we just propagate some x's around. Now, the same thing we did with this 2 on the top left, we can now do with this 4. Except instead of giving 2 x's, we get 2 segments. Because we either take this pair or this pair, and both will take this pair. Similarly, this 1 is now fully picked. I'm just going to clean up a few more x's. Okay. So now we're almost at the conclusion to this puzzle. This one was worth 25 points, so fairly tricky one, especially for its size. and especially at this particular step. So most of what I'm looking at right now involves these 4s, because these 4s are almost done. And that kind of seems like the place to go. And in fact, I think this 4 is the place to go, and how it interacts with these two 1 clues. So there's 3 remaining options for its last segment, right? Let's start with the one that's loose. Let's start with right here. Now what happens if we do that? Well, a contradiction, that's what. Now, is that possible to realistically see? I think so. Is it difficult to see? Sure. Now, regardless of which choice we take now, we're either going to end up here or here with a segment. We don't know which, but in both cases, none of those are allowed. As we're either going to have, we're going to have one of these two inputting to this one. So this 3 is now set. Kind of pushes farther. Now, you know what I said about this 3 being the same as a 2 in the corner in the square puzzle? I lied earlier. It's true that we get these segments, but it's actually stronger than that. In both cases, either these 2 segments are used or they're not used, which gives us this X and this X, which resolves it by the 3. Exact same deduction as up here with the 2. We can now use entry counting on essentially this right half of the grid. It's entered 1, 2, 3 times. It must be entered a 4th time. But the bigger thing to look at is actually this 3 at the bottom. And we're going to switch away from composite for a moment. Here's option 1, and here's option 2. Notice anything in common there? No? Well, here's what's in common. This X. Yeah. Also, these 2 segments. Regardless of which way this 3 goes, it's either going to split and go to, separate like that, or these go together and we fill out an extra segment, which is going to give us almost the entire rest of the puzzle pretty much instantly. This 2 is now done, this 3 is not done. We can't prematurely close the loop. We get this segment coming out regardless of which one is taken. We get this. We cannot go this way without prematurely closing the loop. And after cleaning up these X's, this is the solution to the hexagonal Slitherlink from Hexagony. I'd never tried making one of these before. I knew it had been done. I didn't really know what kinds of patterns to use, and I'm very pleased with what I ended up coming up with for this. There's a lot of intricate logic packed into a small space, and I hope this was an informative little demonstration of how to solve this kind of puzzle in the future. Just what kinds of things to look for a little bit for the patterns, not just what the patterns are by rote, but what results in a pattern. And until next time, later.